Hello and welcome to the AVForums Podcast for Monday, the 20th of January. And joining me on this edition, Steve Withers.
That one puckered up my butthole.
Kaz Harlow.
Now that's how you're supposed to shoot. From now on, that's how you shoot.
And Ed Selley.
They were dead before we ran over them.
Welcome back. This is the first proper podcast of the year being 2020. We're in the future. At this point, I just want to point out to my reviewers, those people who submit reviews here, if anybody uses 2020 vision as their byline at any point this year, you're sacked.
Yeah, well, I figured that was the case.
Rec 2020.
Same. Yeah, any pun using the year. I just wanted to get out of the way. But yes, thanks for listening to the podcast over the last few years. If it wasn't for you five listening to us, we wouldn't be around. But seriously, we are getting an average of around about 24,000 downloads via the streaming services and over 1,200 views on the YouTube videos. So at least somebody out there is either hitting refresh a hell of a lot.
Phil's parents have downloaded each one 23,500 times.
Or there are some people out there enjoying the podcast. And if you are, all we would ask is that I think we're about 29 reviews short of 200 on iTunes. So if you haven't reviewed us favourably on iTunes yet, why not head over there and give us a thumbs up, 4 or 5 stars, whatever you think we're worth, just because it opens us up, if we get over 200, to more search results and more people finding us, and we want to get the message out there. We want more AV enthusiasts and film fans joining us on the podcast. So thank you very much if you are downloading us and listening to us on a weekly basis, and we hope we'll continue that this year, because there's lots of things happening this year. 2 big events that we're going to talk about, and we're also going to talk about the technology that we think is coming in the next year in terms of product and so on, and what we're looking forward to seeing, what we think is maybe reached its ceiling at this point in the product development and so on. So we're going to come on to those things in a little while on the podcast. But first of all, it's been a while since we've all been together on the podcast. So Kaz, entertain us with your fabulous life.
Well, I had a fantastic Christmas. What can you say?
Okay, good enough. Thanks very much.
Did you get what you wanted for Christmas? Was Santa good to you?
No, I didn't buy myself any good presents this year.
I did.
You just bought your kids some.
I did buy the kids lots of things
that you're going to play with.
Yeah, and I bought them some classic old Thunderbirds, which are blatantly for me. I got my 3-year-old son a proper Lego helicopter kit, and then proceeded to make it in front of him, which he was fine with playing with afterwards, but that was definitely for me, and various other things. Less so the dolls, but yeah, I did manage to sneak in a Captain Marvel there, and some of the Avengers characters in amongst the Barbies.
God, Christmas seems like such a long time ago. Ed, what have you been up to?
I had a quiet Christmas. I didn't do anything wild. I also didn't buy myself many gifts. I also assembled a great deal of Lego, although thankfully mine is getting better at assembling the simpler bits himself, so that's fine. He particularly liked his McLaren Senna Lego thing, so that was good. Otherwise, I continued to work over the Christmas and New Year period, which is why my reviews for January appeared pretty much on time.
I was amazed, I have to tell you.
So that's fine. I've been continuing to work, but continuing to do a little bit of work here and there on the house. Now got my second sofa in, so I can have guests.
The cats have somewhere to sit.
Oh, well, the cats bloody love it. The thicker of my 2 cats is absolutely convinced that I've just purchased him a sofa. But that cats are the leading lights of entitlement. So even more so than small children, it has to be said. So yeah, that's all good. Car's been delayed by 2 weeks, but that's not the end of the world. I'll live. I'm not sweating the small stuff. It's giving me more time to ignore the damage on it. I've just been reviewing lots of things. I've got a big book of soup, which I've been working with. I'm going to try a roast potato soup. Shout out, by the way, to anyone doing vegan January. I hope that that's going all right. I do know one enterprising person who is doing both vegan and dry January at the same time, and they look quite tired and sad. I didn't have the heart to tell them.
How depressing is that?
I know. I mean, you can take the most depressing month of the year and make it really stiff, because I have to be honest, all of the happy vegans I know are not teetotal.
Yeah, I mean, this is week 37 of January at the moment, isn't it? I mean, payday is still miles away.
Yeah. Can we be clear about this though? You will be, by the time we get to April, you'll be starting each podcast by going, "Where's my year gone?" Well, here's the answer. Your year is largely compacted into January.
I'm not that bad. It's not April. It's usually about July I start panicking.
Well, okay, be that as it may.
I'm getting old, Ed. Time moves quickly. Well, it moves more quickly for Steve. What you been up to?
Did we have this conversation last week, you and I?
I don't know. Did we not just go straight to CES? Because we were only going to be 30 minutes, wasn't we? And
yeah, that's right. 2 hours later. Yeah, well, usual Christmas CES. Nothing different than anybody else, really. I don't think. I did catch up. I know Kaz has already reviewed it, but I caught up on season 3 of The Deuce, and was delighted that episode 1 of season 3 largely takes place at CES. But back in 1984, it was held over Christmas and New Year in a hotel. On one floor was all the consumer electronics stuff, on the floor above was all the adult video stuff. So those were the days.
Oh, they still had adult video awards.
They had awards when we were there.
Yeah,
but this was
there were
booths and porn stars there signing things.
Yeah, the first year I was there, it was actually in the Sands. Do you remember the Sands where they used to have the press conferences? Yeah. And on the right you had a CES, and if you went to the left, that was the adult video convention.
Right.
Because the year I was there with Chris, we tried to blag ourselves in as the adult video forums. With AVForums.
Adult video forums, yeah. Different times. Anyway, so it's a great series. I have to say, I really enjoyed it. But that made me laugh. And also made me realise, because I think the point they were trying to make, and it's the point that we've often made, is that, pornography is often driven new video technologies, and at the time, of course, videotape was the big driving factor. But one of the things that hasn't caught on, and there's a brilliant Dara O'Brien stand-up bit about it, is virtual reality. And the reason it hasn't caught on is because porn hasn't embraced it. And the reason porn hasn't embraced it is because if you knock one off with a VR headset on, you just don't know who's watching. And he does this superb whole routine about a guy who's had some sort of takes off the VR headset, and there's like 2 cops in the lounge, and there's been like the house has been burgled. There's been he's been kidnapped. There's been a standoff, held hostage. The police are out. His wife's outside with a megaphone, and he's oblivious to all of this.
You seem to have quite a bit of knowledge of this, Steve.
Well, I video, I play PSVR video games, and I'm always slightly in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, I hope no one's in the room, because I was like a right idiot right now. So yeah, I can see why that perhaps you'd have to basically lock every door and make sure no one's around before you settle down to anything involving a hand shandy.
Actually, that reminds me. It shouldn't remind me, but it does. Did anyone see the news a couple of days ago that someone has finally found a use for 3D, and they've been putting cuttlefish in 3D glasses and making them watch images to test their depth perception. And the only highlight of it is that it led to a truly magnificent photo of a cuttlefish wearing a pair of 3D glasses, which I shall stick into the chat box for you to enjoy.
That our image, is it?
I would say so. It's pretty much perfect for the task, and it's good to see that that they found a use for it. So, pleased.
Okay, I don't think I need to tell you what I've been up to, because I think everybody knows, and it seems like such a long time ago now. I just want to move on with my life.
Well, it was over a week ago.
Yeah, no, but I think I've slept for most of that week. I've been wide awake at the wrong times of the day. I actually, but it's worked out because I've gotten lots of things done during the night. And I should have been sleeping. Anyway, I just want this week over with, and so let's move on. Current competitions, Kaz.
Yeah, you can win a copy of Western Stars on Blu-ray. That closes 28th of January. Right, win a copy of Rise of the Foot Soldier 4 Marbella on Blu-ray. That closes 28th of January as well. Win a copy of Pain and Glory on Blu-ray. That's 4th of February. A copy of It Chapter 2 on Blu-ray and a copy of the original novel. That's 4th of February. Win copies of Criterion's January titles on Blu-ray. They include Being There, the Peter Sellers film, Holiday, and Sancho the Bailiff. That closes 11th of February. Lots more competitions are open, being added daily, so head over to avforums.com/competitions to enter even more.
And previous competition winners?
Shall we do this as a rolling set, because there's lots of them?
Okay, if the three of you want to organise that, go ahead.
Sure. Previous competition winners. Richard Sims 7 won a Christmas 5 Steelbook 4K and Blu-ray collection from Lionsgate.
Dickie Duvet won a Christmas 7 4K bundle from Lionsgate.
Oldish Malik won Catherine the Great on Blu-ray.
The Who fan won Star Trek Discovery on Blu-ray.
JTL 1131 won Ironweed on Blu-ray.
Tom Pobb and Andrew Ingold, I'm assuming that's two people and not just one very long username, won Operation Petticoat on Blu-ray.
Damien 1978 won Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on Blu-ray.
Ninja Monkey UK won Watchmen on 4K.
Umar 316, these names are getting interesting, won Crawl on Blu-ray.
Malcastle won Angel Has Fallen on Blu-ray.
Indiana Jones won Wonder Woman Bloodline Steelbook on Blu-ray. Or Steelbook Blu-ray, yeah.
Nick Teal won Angel Has Fallen on 4K Blu-ray.
Vader 100 and Cowboy Bar 666 won What's New Pussycat on Blu-ray.
And Primetime won Billy Connolly Made in Scotland on Blu-ray.
Well done, Kaz. You made up some really interesting names there.
People are getting quite imaginative with their usernames, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, it is the internet in 2020, so...
Yeah, sure, I suppose they've got the hang of it now.
Well, how many members do we have?
A lot.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands.
I would say, like, some of these competitions, several thousand people enter them. So I guess we mix it up occasionally.
Mind you, there's a few names that look quite... Dickie Duvet's been in there before.
Yeah, the Who fan has as well. Definitely.
Yeah, the Who fan. Yeah, recognise those names.
Richard Sims 7, he's a regular.
Yeah, he's won a few things.
Indiana Jones. Yeah.
When he's not raiding tombs.
Yeah. So, it's a good spread. Well done, you all.
Yep, and remember, there's more competitions, so go and enter them. AVForums.com competitions. We'll be back in a sec with hardware. Right, so new year, we've all been doing our own things. I'm sure we've got stuff to review, it's just we don't have stuff to talk about. And I think beginning of the year, it's probably best to look at the year ahead. 2020 is going to be an interesting year. We've got the Olympics in 8K.
Not here, we haven't.
Not here, but the Olympics will be in 8K in Japan by NHK. Over here we've got the Euros. Interesting Euros this year. It's split amongst a number of venues. So that'll be interesting. And those events always sell TVs for people want to update. It's normally World Cup that really pushes it, but I think the Olympics is a bit of a pull for some people to update their TVs. So there will be a bit of TV buying going on this year. Will the TV manufacturers have their TVs out in time? Because World Cup time last time, they were all a little bit late.
They were, yeah.
Yeah, so be interesting to see what happens. So before we delve into it, a brand name has come back from the dead. We discussed them last year, Larva. They went out of business. They have been resuscitated as we enter the new year. There are some details. The story is on the homepage if you want all the details, but it'll be interesting to see what the business model is. Now that
who's resuscitated them then? I mean, have they been bought by another...
It's been an international investment company specialising in consumer electronics and technology investments.
You see, Ed's got the story open and he's been reading it.
Well, it's not on the running order.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of dropped that one in at the last minute. But, they're called Skytech, and they've taken over. They've kept 50 employees. They've kept some of the I think it's the traditional headquarters they've kept, and it'll be interesting to see what angle they take when it comes back to product. Are they going to remain in the high-end, high-cost sector, luxury sector, or are they going to do things a little bit differently this time around? Because although you might have larger margins when it comes to luxury goods, are people actually buying luxury TVs, especially OLED TVs, where you can pick an OLED TV up for about $1,000 now, and that price is only going to erode over the next year with even more manufacturers coming on board with OLED now. Although interestingly, Hisense are not. Didn't work for Hisense.
They obviously weren't manufacturing the panels, were they? They were just buying them.
They were just buying them and badging them and so on. But it'll be interesting to see price erosion and so on, and it'll be interesting to see where Loewe go with this. Now, Ed's worked in the industry. If you were reviving a company like this, Ed, where would your ambitions lie?
That's a very, very interesting question, because I just don't know. When we discussed it when Loewe actually folded, I postulated that an existing television manufacturer would essentially go in for the name and little else in the way of infrastructure, and use it as a way of differentiating more expensive televisions, which they were making, and they had the production, bulk to do so. This is a different approach, so I have not the slightest idea what the situation is going to be. I don't. If they can secure the right technology at a price which isn't eye-watering in terms of screens to build on and so on and so forth, there's no reason why they couldn't do a sensible range of televisions incorporating, their very, very high-quality industrial design. But equally, as we discussed at the time, the amount of industrial design you can apply to a 55-inch plus rectangle with sod or bezel, because in most regards, anything that you do to it is just making it bigger, which is not really what people are looking for in this day and age. So I don't know. I suppose, if they voiced, sorry, I didn't read the whole article. They voiced an intention that it's going to be about televisions. They simply said, we want to get started quickly with the development of new products.
Yeah.
And we reposition Loewe as an international premium brand for sophisticated consumer electronics.
Which in
we will
market
continue
terms
to maintain
could mean
most
anything.
of the previously known portfolio in the TV segment and other areas. That doesn't strike me as a ringing endorsement that it's going to be chock full of new televisions.
No, but
and if they have a shred of sense, it won't be.
But interestingly, Hisense are a partner going forward. So Hisense did come on board before they folded, and according to the article that Andy put together, they are getting back behind. And are going to be collaborators going forward as well. So again, it's going to be interesting to see
that's interesting.
Exactly where they go with this. Because Hisense have moved away from OLED, they are now back with QLED because they feel they can do more with that technology than they could with OLED. And reading between the lines, although I didn't have this said to me at all, and this is just me speculating, but it would appear that if you are going to get on board with OLED, there are certain price points you are not allowed to exploit. If you're getting your panels from LG Display.
And it's difficult, isn't it? Because everyone's getting their panel from the same manufacturer, which means everyone's around about the same price. And if your sort of USP is being not necessarily the best known name, but being able to hit some quite low price points, and you can't do that, and you're competing with LG, who are also being very competitive in pricing terms, it's difficult. Really difficult.
Yeah. And you can see why the likes of Panasonic and Sony have gone off and done their own thing as well, so introducing their own tech. So Panasonic have worked on the panel and adding their own technology behind the panel, as well as how they deal with heat and so on with the custom stuff, and Sony have turned the panel into a speaker and done their little tweaks as well. So you can see why they've tried to add their own value into the products, because if you're all getting the screens from the same source and there are conditions attached to that, you need to make your product stand out in the market. So it'll be interesting to see what Loewe do, whether they do come back with an OLED screen or whether they go QLED, which seems to be gaining popularity again. Because it can do things that OLED can't do at the moment. So let's move the conversation on then. And it's an interesting point. It's one that Steve raised at the end of last year. Did an article, and the article hasn't been published yet because things changed.
Thought it might be wise to wait and see what actually happened at CES in case something. I had a fairly shrewd idea that not much was going to happen at CES, but you never know. As it turns out, I think it just reinforced my original opinion.
Yeah, and it's an opinion held by quite a few people, and it's one of these things, we touched on it last week, but HDR has basically curtailed where OLED can go, really, at this moment in time, in terms of the panels that we have that are being mass produced at this moment in time. Want to make that clear. We're not talking about OLED as a whole technology, because there are offshoots of the technology that are being developed, are being worked on, that are not at the consumer level. But if you're talking about a consumer OLED TV at this moment in time, it's a WRGB, which means it's a white light, and it also uses RGB in there, but it's not true RGB display. because it's using a white pixel,
Yeah.
which means it can't get too bright. And certainly if you want accurate colours, it can only get to a certain brightness before the colours become inaccurate. And OLED also suffers from the point of view that because it's restricted in terms of light, it's also restricted in terms of colour volume. So that's how bright a colour can get before it becomes inaccurate. OLED does stuff really well up to
OLED.
Yeah, but it does things really, really well. But it has a ceiling, a technical ceiling, where the likes of Panasonic are working on it this year, and we've had some hints from other manufacturers that they're trying to push the nit values and peak brightnesses of these panels. But you're talking about a ceiling of around about 1,000 nits in an accurate mode.
3 years ago, I said, "No, what's the maximum you're going to be able to get an OLED panel to?" And they said 1,000 nits.
Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that the technology is worthless in any way whatsoever. It just means it's going to have this ceiling point until they find a way of pushing the technology and making it better. And that at the moment looks like QD OLED, which uses blue light. But the problem with using blue light is this is why we have a white light at the minute. It decays too fast. So what they have to develop to push OLED on is a panel that is either true RGB, which is very, very expensive. Samsung released one years ago.
And the monitor that you had
the
last
Sony,
year.
The Sony X300, it was an RGB. But it's very, very expensive to do, to get that accuracy. And again, you're pushing 1,000 nits. The professional monitor could only hit 1,000 nits. It did it consistently. It had fans behind and so on. So there is a ceiling point to OLED. Does that take away from the desirability of having an OLED TV, though?
I don't think it necessarily takes away from the desirability. I think it's just something that limits its long-term potential at the moment, because OLED's, it's been around for decades, and when it was being developed, we lived in an SDR world and had done since the beginning of TV. It's only everything's fundamental. Everything's completely changed in the last 5 years. But prior to that, content was, standard or high def. It was D65 Rec 709, and it was mastered at 100 nits. And an OLED TV can do those things brilliantly, better than any other display that you can currently buy. But suddenly, in 5 years, we went from that to a new world where content's being mastered at 1,000, 4,000, sometimes even 10,000 nits. We've got the wider color space of DCI P3 within a Rec 2020 container. And obviously we're moving into 4K and now 8K. I think it's amazing that LG Displays have managed to push that technology as far as they have in such a short space of time. They've gone from launching the first TVs that we saw, the ones you mentioned, the Samsung and the LG OLEDs that were back in. Well, we saw the launch in 2012, but we didn't see any samples until about 2013. They were full HD, SDR, and now we've got OLED TVs. They're 4K. You can buy some 8K if you've got enough money. And they can do nearly 1,000 nits. I mean, the GZ 2000 that you reviewed last year, Phil and I reviewed. That was getting on to nearly 900 nits. And I think Panasonic were talking about pushing that a little bit further this year, maybe getting to that 1,000 point. They're doing just under 100% of DCI P3, pretty much the whole color. But obviously, as you say, Phil, as the brightness increases, that does change. But
so in terms of color volume, it is restricted. It can push out on 2 points. If you think of it as a 3D graph, on 2 points of the graph, it can certainly reach those points, but it's luminance and brightness where it normally suffers.
Yeah, and obviously tone mapping, means that the content is being mapped to the capability of the display, and because it's pixel precise and because it's self-emissive, you get very precise highlights, which always look good. You've got the deep blacks, of course, which give you a fantastic contrast performance. And most content, certainly a lot of content, certainly all the streaming content, is mastered at 1,000 nits. So, there's nothing to OLED looks fantastic. And it still does look fantastic.
And it's going to look fantastic for the next few years as well. So
there are a few limiting factors, and one of the biggest ones obviously is a full field pattern. If you're talking about a bright full field image, that's where it struggles. At the moment, what is it, 150, 160 nits?
So, Steve, let's think about content that we are actually going to watch on our OLED TV, other than test patterns that us as people tend to watch in these TVs. How many times within content would you need a full raster, 100% brightness on white?
Doesn't it depend on the content slightly? But I don't think, what do you think the average is? Even if it's just 200 nits, it's still too bright for the TV, isn't it? 200 nits isn't that much. I mean, certainly if you could put an OLED next to a high-end Samsung QLED, there's no question the overall image appears brighter. And a lot of people will say that it looks a bit dim on the on the OLED. And I think that's a fair, that
is a fair comment. But what I was coming on to is that the industry has settled down, and when I say the industry, I mean like how they're finishing content. It has calmed down. It was split between 1,000 and 4,000 nit, with some content at 10,000 nit. It seems to be that, certainly looking at the post industry at the moment, it seems to be around about 1,000 nits is being used. There is the odd title which is still being mastered within a larger container, but things seem to have settled down at around about 1,000 nits. And the other thing that you have to remember here is, I think people, quite rightly, because it's never really pointed out, that they assume that 1,000 nits is going to give them a suntan. Everything is 1,000 nits brightness. That's not how this works. And the vast majority of content, if you actually look at the max CLL and max fall of content, very rarely is it above 600 or 700 nits in terms of peak brightness. And overall luminance is still round about 100 to 200 nits for a normal scene. So, do we need brighter displays, Steve?
Do we need them? Not necessarily, but I think we're going through a transitionary period, and that will change over time. And things will get a bit brighter. I'm not like you're saying, Phil. You're right. It's not like the whole screen is going to be 1,000 nits. That would be uncomfortable, to say the least. But I can see 200-300 nits being. I mean, it depends on the content as well. If you're looking at something like The Revenant, for example, where there's a lot of snowy white fields in that, then that can be quite a bright image, even if it's just the full field. But that is a specific example. But I just think as we look ahead. My thoughts was more a case of, has OLED reached its peak? And I will say that the last 3 years, and you can probably back me up here, those panels are basically the same, aren't they? Apart from Panasonic really pushing things with the custom Pro panel.
Yeah, and last year LG Display changed the notch on the Pixel as well to help with brightness. So there were some slight differences to the panel. It'd be interesting to see what they've done this year as well.
They didn't say anything about the panel. Did they say anything about the panel at CES?
No, the only person that mentioned it was a 2020 panel was Paul Williams at Panasonic.
Yeah, I don't think he meant that was an LG. I don't think, watching it, that he meant it's a different panel from last year from LG Display.
I'm going to see brand new panels this week. I'm going to take my eyepiece with me and have a look.
Yeah, that's true.
But yes, I think...
And I know that there are some things coming down the pipeline. I know LG are doing stuff in terms of OLED production and design that will change over the next few years, and people talk about quantum dot OLED being a big. I've got to say, don't put all your hopes on quantum dot OLED. I mean, I know people are researching it and developing it, but I haven't actually. Have you actually seen any quantum dot OLEDs yet?
No, I have not.
I haven't seen anything either. Not behind the scenes.
The technology looks promising though, because it's not as pushing the boundaries as much as micro LED. So
it won't be as expensive.
Yeah,
I guess it comes down to the thing that not concerns me, but the thing, because OLED was never really developed for an HDR world. You got to wonder what driving OLED panels as hard as they are now being driven to deliver HDR, what impact that's going to have on their long-term life.
Yeah.
I've got to wonder about that. And obviously that does raise the issue. I mean, I can say personally, and I've 3 different OLEDs over the last 3 years. I've never had a problem with image retention or screen burn on any of my OLED TVs.
No, and I can vouch for that as well. I've had
but I have seen it on other things, and I have certainly read about it, and there's certainly people on the forums who've experienced it. So it is a danger still. It hasn't been completely eliminated, although there's lots of features built into the TV these days to mitigate that risk.
And that has improved. That's a big point to make. Over the generations.
Definitely it was definitely
7,
a big issue in the early days.
Yeah, from B6, B7, I think those are the panels where you might have issues, because certainly from the 8 and the 9, from all manufacturers, and I'm using LG's 8 and 9 there, but you can apply that to the same manufacturer years for other manufacturers. They have added tons of mitigation technology in. It will, if you leave it in standby, and you really should be leaving your TV in standby when you switch it off, it will run in the background. It'll run its processing, it'll go through the whole wash screen and all the rest of it, and it'll apply voltages. If you've been watching lots of letterbox stuff, it'll apply the voltages to try and age stuff properly. And I've noticed I'm running the C9, and you're running a C9 at the minute as well, Steve, and if I pause to go into the next room and come back, screensaver's on within a few seconds. It doesn't keep the static image on for very long.
Depends on the content, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. Depends on
it'll go to screensaver. If it's say a Blu-ray player or something like that, it'll just dim the picture. It doesn't actually go to a full screensaver, I don't think.
To be honest, I've got the B7 and I haven't experienced any issues with that. I will say, and I'm quite prepared to acknowledge that mine has seen an abnormally high amount of use in this regard in terms of hot plugging. My HDMI ARC connection has failed. Which is a bit of an odd one, and it's a bit of a pig for testing, because I have no idea what the mechanics of getting that sorted are. But I from my perspective, I've been listening to this, and what was I watching the other day? I was watching something on Netflix in Dolby Vision. And actually, do you know what? I admittedly I was tired, and I do need to have an eye test. But nevertheless, I in many regards found some of that uncomfortably bright. The idea of things getting...
No, I've never heard that said. I've heard the opposite, but I've never heard that said.
To be fair, it was a food program. So it was, as far as I was concerned, it was quite well lit anyway. But there were points. It just didn't look. I don't necessarily find myself blown away by the idea of being able to just throw more and more light at the issue.
No, and that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is
I grant you that you have
the highlight
explained
detail
that it's about sustained brightness across an image and so on and so forth. But it's in the same. I'm just making a slightly poor analogy here, but nevertheless, I'm sat here staring at my rack of stuff, and I mean obviously there's 2 DACs here at the moment, one of which is good to 768 kilohertz and one of which is good to that one tops out at 384, and occasionally you get an ambitious studio or record label that actually produces stuff at that point, but for the most part things tick along at a rather more sensible point. Now, in terms of screens, it's a bit more it's obviously far more ratified and so on and so forth. But it just concerns me, not specifically for the future of OLED, but for the for lessons that we seemingly seem unwilling to learn. That if you continuously point out to Joe Public, hey, guess what? Your shit's now obsolete. Buy some more shit. Eventually, they stop buying your shit.
Yeah, and there is that problem. Which was I was going to come on to this point to wrap up the conversation. Is there built-in obsolescence? Absolutely, that is happening, and it's starting to really annoy people.
Part of it is because technology keeps on developing, and manufacturers.
Well, here's a good
more
one.
to keep things updated. But I guess their view would be, if they kept doing that, they're not going to sell more TVs.
Yes, I get that from a business point of view, but the annoying thing is filmmaker mode, it's software based, okay? It's not doing anything other than a picture preset. There's nothing else going on there apart from that and reading a bit of metadata. Yeah, there was a certain manufacturer, when I pointed that out to them and said, you had people last year spending many thousands of pounds on your TV. Will you do the firmware update and add filmmaker mode to last year's TV? And they said, no, why would you do that?
I mean, I was very pleased to see that LG, for example, will be adding Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus and other things to some of their older TVs. It'd be nice to see more manufacturers do that. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes there are genuine limitations.
If it's a silicon issue,
they can't. Yeah. Sometimes that is genuinely the case. Many times I suspect it's deliberately on their part, because at the end of the day, they're a business and they need to keep selling TVs every year. And obviously things change very fast these days, which is probably the reason I was thinking about this. Was I thinking, well, the world's changed a lot in just 5 years in terms of TVs and technology, particularly display technology. OLED has done an amazing job of keeping pace with that over the last 5 years, considering it was never really developed for this in the first place. But I do think it is at or very close to now its peak in terms of what they can currently do with an OLED panel. And I appreciate there may be other things coming down the line in 2 or 3 years that are different that deliver slightly more. But even then, I think really 200-300, if you can get to 200 nits, maybe even 300 nits of a full field brightness and 1,000 nits peak brightness, that's probably good enough for most content anyway. So OLED's certainly not, so I'm not saying it's it's over. Even if it has reached its peak, it's a bloody good peak. And I can certainly imagine that with new things like printing processes to mass produce OLEDs, that costs can drop over time.
Yeah, because you've got to remember that the OLED is still not mass market.
No, not yet. But I can definitely see that being the case in the next couple of years, that it will become is a mass market product. And there's going to be more competition, of course, with other manufacturers coming on board. Chinese manufacturers starting to ramp up OLED production, so there will be a competition to just LG display. That will drive prices down too, and so that will be interesting, and it will mean that people can enjoy the benefits of OLED at a much lower price point, which does mean there will be an opportunity for something else to take the high end, which has been dominated by OLED up until now. What I was thinking about was A, has OLED reached its peak? The answer to that, I think, is probably yes. And B, if so, yes, sorry, technically reached its peak, and if so, what might replace it at the high end as a premium display technology?
Yeah. Right, here's the question, just to wrap this up, because this conversation is going to go on and on this year, because this is going to be a year where hopefully we start to see where things are going to go in the future at the high end. And I want to make this point, we are talking about the high end of the market. We're not talking about mass market. Mass market is still to experience OLED. I think OLED will do extremely well when it hits mass market. We've seen the 48-inch being added this year, which is great, because now that they're cutting a lot of glass for 77-inch, the offcut of that is 48 inches. That's how this works. That's why they've been able to introduce that. And obviously, as things develop and they go for other screen sizes, they will work out how they can cut the glass and get other screen sizes. So it's going to develop. We're going to have more of OLED, and we're not saying OLED is dead in any way whatsoever. Steve, your money right now this year, what TV would you buy?
You mean as in technology?
As in technology.
Yeah, OLED.
Yeah. It'd be OLED for me. Ed?
It would probably be another OLED.
Okay, right. And Kaz?
Yeah, OLED. I loved it.
Right. Okay. So we're not saying OLED's dead in any way whatsoever. What Steve's pointing out is, as a technology, it's probably reached the peak in terms of its large development cycle. There will be performance gains. They will find other ways of eking percentage performance increases out of the technology. But I think in terms of major developments, you're now looking at other technologies to take over at the higher end of the market. And it'll be interesting to see what way that goes, because there are some interesting tech. I mean, micro LED, I'm not going to lie, it looks absolutely bloody amazing, but you need to be a lottery winner, basically, at this moment in time. And I've yet to see normal content on it, which I'm hoping, speaking nicely to Samsung this year, I'll at least get to see something like that this year. And I know Steve's pushing for that as well. So hopefully we'll get somewhere with that. And we'll be able to see normal content, maybe produce a video, maybe do a review or whatever. We'll push for that. But it's really stratospherically expensive, and it's going to be for a number of years, even though they're now saying it's a consumer product. It's a rich man's toy at the minute. It'll go on a few yachts.
Got to start somewhere there, wasn't it? Really?
Exactly. That's where OLED started, And
not just OLED.
Plasma.
2012, I had an 85-inch 4K SDR LCD LG TV in for review, if you remember, Phil. That was 20 grand.
Yeah. Oh, that was nothing on the 150-inch.
Oh yeah,
plasma that cost 170 odd £1,000 and was ordered by a certain football club owner for his yacht, and he ordered 3 or 4 of them for the yacht.
I'm looking forward to finding one in Cash Converters.
Having seen the size of that gentleman's yacht, he'd need TVs that big.
Yes, especially when he's got 2 helicopter decks at the back.
And the launch for that yacht is the size of most yachts.
Yeah, but anyway, we're going to come back to this as the year moves on, as we get to see the new TVs. Like I say, I'm going to Philips event this coming week, which is Tuesday and Wednesday. So Philips don't do CES because Philips is a different company over in America. Remember where it was? So they do the European launch. TP Vision, Philips do their European launch separately. It's in Amsterdam. It's at the airport, so I don't have to go anywhere. Basically land, walk to the hotel, see the stuff, walk back to the plane and fly home again. But we will
That
check.
makes it sound like your flight process is far more hands-on than realistically it is. It's like
That would be fun if you had to fly the plane there as well.
park my Cessna up.
Because now I've got Skywalker, Ed. I'm now watching Air Crash Investigation, the latest series, and
You
I've
see,
got
I
the
am,
series
I am
linked.
jealous of that. And it's not on Now TV, is it? There's no one that you...
I don't think so, no.
There's nothing you can buy that makes that happen. But unfortunately, I don't know if you saw on Twitter, I don't have a television aerial or a satellite dish at the moment. In the unpleasant weather earlier in the week, my aerial was torn off the side of the house. And on the way down, it managed to tear the GMB out of my satellite dish as well. So, and then...
Yeah, somebody had it in for you that week.
What really pains me is that it doesn't bother me in any way, shape, or form.
Well,
There's
there
not
you
been
go.
a single live television moment. I thought, oh no, I'm missing that. It's like, oh yeah, fine. So I'll get around to getting it repaired eventually. I mean, I've got a TV license, so it's probably only fair. But,
Yeah. And you'll all be happy to know that Chernobyl is available in 4K, so I've downloaded the whole thing, so I'm going to go and watch it in 4K. So I can,
So.
yeah, good. I'm going to get round to do that. Right, so anyway, that wraps up that conversation. You no doubt have lots of your own opinions, where you like to see technology going, what your plans are for buying screens. I guess with the internet as well, Steve, this is the problem with the internet. The internet wants everything tomorrow.
Yeah, they read about something that's like 5 years away or is in development and is a long way from being a mainstream product, and they think it's going to arrive tomorrow. They need to calm down. A lot of stuff that I've seen being mentioned in various threads, you ain't going to see it at all, or some of it maybe in years. But it's like, how often have we seen things at CES and then never seen them again?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most exciting products we saw was, it's now called Cledis.
Yeah,
but
sounds
that was
like a venereal disease.
It does. It does a little bit STD. But yeah, that was Sony's Crystal LED, which was
Crystal
micro
LED,
LED.
Yeah,
That's
it
what
was
it
micro
was.
LED. That's what it was, and that was about what 5-6 years ago.
No, that was 2012.
2012.
Yeah, that was 2012.
8 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah,
well,
right.
it was
We saw that
conceived
8
by the
years
Mayan
ago.
apocalypse. That's what happened.
So we all got very excited at the time, but we never saw it. It didn't see the light of day as a genuine.
It saw light of day as a professional B2B product for showing adverts on the side of buildings. That's where you see it, and it was at CES again this year. Huge screen, but again, I mean, you're talking millions for something like that, and it's because they cannot make it in any form where they can mass produce it. That's the issue.
So if Samsung can crack that, then they could be on to an absolute winner as far as that goes. But it will come down to being able to produce it in large numbers, in viable yields, and it's something approaching a realistic price. We'll see. But,
yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. Stay tuned to the podcast for more. We'll be back in a sec with some movie reviews and news. Right, so let's move on. We're going to do 2 film reviews now with no spoilers, and then we're going to do what we promised we were going to do a while ago, and that is talk about Star Wars. And it's been such a long time ago, I've probably forgotten more than I can remember. But we'll come on to that towards the end of the podcast. That will be spoiler heavy, but come on people, you've had 8 weeks now to see this film? So if you haven't seen it, we'll tell you when to switch off. We'll do that at the end. So let's turn to films that we have seen. I'm going to go first because I'm going to be pretty quick with this one. I know Kaz has seen it as well, Bad Boys for Life. I was a big fan of the original films because I saw them when they originally came out, in that climate, in that time, where those films were acceptable. I think, having revisited the films recently when they came out, first of all on Blu-ray, and they're now available on UHD, they haven't aged very well. They're certainly films of their time. And I'm not saying that makes them a bad film in any way. It's just they wouldn't get made now. especially with the whole Me Too movement that's happened in the last few years and so on. How women are portrayed in movies. There's lots of things that have changed.
I think it's how women are portrayed in Michael Bay movies.
Yes. And
he's not the director, right? So maybe that's why it's better.
Yes, well, I'm going to come on to that because I'm quite glad that Michael Bay only appears in front of the camera and not behind it for this one. Because what I like about what they've done with Bad Boys for Life is that, these are two guys that are hitting, well, Smith's in his mid-50s, coming at 60. I'm not really sure about Martin Lawrence, but I would guess that he's about to hit
it's
60.
About 60 kilos.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's not enough, is it? It's going to be more than that.
It's going to be more than that. I can't remember who said it, but the whole hamster with nuts in his cheeks, was it? I couldn't get that out of my head as I was watching it. But
it does look like he's storing his lunch for later, doesn't it?
It does. It does. But let's face it, these guys are getting on. The same as this film made me feel old because I remember the originals when they came along in the 90s. They were very much of their time. This is very much of its time now. And that's what I liked about it. I liked the fact that these are old guys that, they're close to retirement. They want a bit more of an easy life. Will Smith still wants to run around and be the young guy and shoot up everything and chase the bad guys, whereas Martin Lawrence's character, he just wants to retire. He's become a granddad, and I really like that juxtaposition of where they were in the 90s, where they are now, and it does kind of shadow where things go as you get older, and that's where a lot of the humour came from as well. I really like the fact that Marcus he didn't want to do any of this crap anymore. He just wanted to retire and have an easy life.
I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yep, basically. And then you got the younger people coming in. So there was a unit. I'm trying to remember the name of the unit now. Help me out, Kaz. What did Ammo, that's it. Which was obviously full of young whiz kids, fresh out of university or police training school and so on.
Point Break, young, dumb, full of cum.
Basically wanting to be, and no respect for their elders, basically. And I like that as well. I really like the way they pitched the movie. So without any spoilers, there's some real belly laughs in here, and you know where you're going to get the belly laughs from. It's because they're reluctant. You get the reluctance from Lawrence, and you get Will Smith, who's still trying to be this young flash guy who wants to get the girls, shit up the bad guys and all this. And it's a great dynamic. They add a few really silly things in there. Some of the banter misses, doesn't quite hit. But I've got to say, it's the first time in a while that I've sat in a cinema where the whole cinema was laugh out loud at the right moment. So there are plenty of jokes that do land, and they are very, very, very entertaining. It's not a great film in terms of Oscar material or anything like that. It's basically what you expect from a Bad Boys film, but a Bad Boys film for 2020, not for the 1990s. So that was my point of view. Kaz?
I am going to be really controversial and say I kind of missed Michael Bay. I don't miss his excessive upskirt shots of teenage girls, but I do miss his handling of action. I think he's got a real flair for handling the way someone dives through the air slow-mo, the way John Woo would handle it, except in the US. And there's some dynamics that he puts into action scenes that makes them feel very slick. So I thought it was a good film, and I definitely enjoyed seeing them back. And it's probably the best we could expect from them. But I was kind of disappointed that the directors will imitate Michael Bay. I'd have been happy if they did we'll put our own stamp on it, like the directors of the Mission Impossible series. But they didn't. They just tried to be Michael Bay, and it wasn't there. So I
really didn't pick up on that.
Well, I mean, from the opening scene, like the racing along the beach and speeding up and slowing down, it felt like we're trying to be a bit Michael Bay here with what we're doing. I don't know whether I don't know whether it always worked for me. I also think I felt it was a little bit like the Lethal Weapon 4 of the bunch. So that doesn't make it a bad movie at all.
That's why I liked it. I liked it because they were coming from, we're old guys, still doing the same shit. I like that.
But the jokes in Lethal Weapon 4 weren't the jokes in Lethal Weapon 1. They weren't the jokes in Lethal Weapon 1, and I don't mean because of the age. The age thing's great, but they were rocking the age jokes in Lethal Weapon 1 as well. But the banter is a bit more close to parody But you know what? I did enjoy it. There were just a few things in it which, including possibly the ending, which didn't always work because it felt like they were building a franchise here. Someone saw dollar bills and went, how can we make this into the Fast and Furious series?
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that, and it's been greenlit for another one, which it doesn't need.
It's also done really well in its opening weekend. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's done amazingly well. That's the first time for a while that I've sat in a screening that was full. I mean, it was full on opening day. So,
but you know what? Seeing Martin Lawrence back, giving probably the most energetic performance anyone could realistically expect from him, and seeing Will Smith back actually enjoying himself. It's worth seeing for those two things.
Yeah,
Even
absolutely.
if the rest doesn't quite fit together, I mean, and isn't. You're right. I mean, the first two were the product of the time, but you know, it's worth seeing for having those two together. And if they get the chance to do another one and massage out the edges, you never know.
Yeah.
If they're going to do a fourth one, why didn't they call that Bad Boys for Life? Why didn't they call this something else?
Because I don't think Lawrence is going to come back. So I think this is the final one with these two. Without
fit him in through the door anymore.
Without going any further into the plot or anything else. That's what I think. Anyway.
Interesting. That's an interesting angle.
Yeah.
The one takeaway I have from what you just said there, I've now got into my head, just taking an existing franchise or concept and then just swapping over directors from likely candidate to completely unlikely candidate. So I don't know, get Terrence Malick in to do Bad Boys 4, or
well, to be fair, you say that, but they got Brian De Palma to do Mission Impossible, which was an odd choice, but a really good choice to put a stamp on it. And who did they get to direct the second Mission Impossible?
John Woo, wasn't it?
John Woo.
Yeah, John Woo. Who would go from Brian De Palma to John Woo?
That was kind of what I liked about Mission Impossible. Completely different directors each time until recently.
I completely agree. So maybe it'll work. I'm not suggesting Terrence Malick, please, but I'm suggesting maybe they could go from.
Where's your sense of adventure? Come on,
to like Jordan Peele. They could do something a little bit.
Well, who thought Sam Mendes would direct a James Bond film?
Yes, quite. Yeah.
So
which brings us up to 1917.
Yeah, we'll come onto that in a sec. We'll come onto that. But
brilliant segue then.
Just to wrap up on Bad Boys for Life, like I said in the bit that I wrote in the thread, I think this was wrapping up a trilogy, and it was a good way of doing it. I liked the fact that it wasn't trying to be a 90s Bad Boys movie. It was being a Bad Boys movie for the time. I think me and Kaz will disagree on the worth of Michael Bay being involved. I thought it worked better without him. Kaz,
you know what? I can see that. I don't like Michael Bay, and I think his Transformers movies are terrible. It's just when it comes to action,
right,
in the Bad Boys movies, I think he's got a certain eye for slick, epic action in those movies. I don't mean in Transformers where it's just.
He delivered some good action in Six Underground.
Yeah, I mean it's if you can put that, I just think that he has a better handle on slick action. I don't like the guy, and I think his movies are terrible. But I miss that in the action scene.
The Rock's good.
I like.
And I love Armageddon.
In the review, I said I miss Bad Boys Michael Bay. I don't miss Transformers.
Before he started churning out Transformers.
Yeah, exactly. So we wouldn't have got that Michael Bay even if he had that.
Right, Bad Boys for Life, I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. And I think you gave it 7, didn't you, Kaz?
Yeah, I did. I comfortably gave it 7,
yeah. And I'd go and see it on the big screen if you can. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing it back on the big screen, and it's nicely shot. And it has some of that nice looking cinematography as well that you expect from a film like this. So, which ties in nicely with the two that have gone before in terms of look and so on. And there was quite a bit of reprise in terms of the music as well, which I found quite surprising that I still knew what the theme tune was. And I don't mean Bad Boys, what are you going to do? Right, so let's move on to Sam Mendes and my all-time favourite cinematographer. I've yet to see this film, so please don't spoil it. But I am desperate
we
to
win
see it.
World War One. Does that help? No, 1917. So I think the best way of describing this is to think of it as a World War One equivalent to Dunkirk, where Dunkirk took place within a historical event, but it kind of created this really tense, essentially sort of tight thriller about getting off that damn beach. And this is a similar kind of thing. It's a mission to deliver a message, basically, across enemy lines to stop an assault that would end up in everyone being killed. And it's really, although they don't shy away from the horrors of World War One, really it's a men on a mission. We've got to get this message, similar, I think, to the plot of Gallipoli, actually, and we've got a time period to do it in. And in fact, to make that time period even more intense, the film's shot in a single. Well, it's not shot in a single take, but it looks like it was shot in a single take, and that kind of adds more urgency to the mission, because you're going through it in real time. It also means that some of the action scenes are quite intense because they can't just cut away to someone else shooting or whatever. It's always from the point of view of the protagonist, so you feel like you're really in there with them. And I've got to say, I really enjoyed it. I'll definitely give this a 9 out of 10. That it was really exciting, brilliantly made. I mean, sometimes it's obvious when they're going to cut to another take because someone will walk in front of the camera or go behind a tree.
Or an entire day passes.
Sorry?
Or an entire day passes.
Well, no. A character gets knocked out halfway through and then wakes up. So it's always from his... If you think about it as being from his perspective, he was unconscious for a certain number of hours, so it's just a black screen, and then he wakes up. So yeah, they do fudge it slightly because I think they've got 8 hours to get there. It's a 2-hour movie, so work it out for yourself. But the photography is amazing. There's shots in it where I sort of thought, how do they do that? Some really nice, cool stuff. There's some lovely, beautiful shots at the nighttime scenes with flares falling, with the lights going through. I love
Roger Deakins. Yeah, anything he does, it's amazing.
Yeah, he does one shot where it is, as Steve says, the flares are falling on one side and the sun is coming up on the other side. Well, you can't see the sun, but it's.
There's a shot where the camera goes out the window of a building, and you sort of you forget. Hang on, how did they do that?
Yeah,
up on the third floor a minute ago. Or where they cross a river and the camera just keeps moving across the river. I mean, I must have used a wire or something, I guess. But yeah, it's very well. It's brilliantly shot. Have you seen it, Kaz?
I have. Yeah. I mean, it is an exercise in proficient filmmaking. I'm not entirely sure I loved the pitch that it was a single take when it wasn't.
It didn't need to be a single take.
Yeah,
you could have just shot it normally. But...
Yeah, it felt a tiny bit contrived, if I'm going to pick holes in it. But I really enjoyed it. Very tense, as you say. I'd have probably gone with an 8, and the only reason I'd go with an 8 is because the day before I found out the Oscar announcements. And I think I went in expecting it to be a very good movie, but when I heard it had like 10 nominations, I was expecting it to be one of the best movies of the year. And, when you set your expectations that high, you go in, you watch it, and you come out of it and go, well, it was very, very good, but who's giving it 10 Oscars?
It's got quite a few nice little cameos in it too, isn't it, from various actors. And the performances are good, I have to say. Particularly from George Mackay, who's the main character, and there's also Dean Charles Chapman, who is King Tommen in Game of Thrones. Looking a bit chubby, actually. I'll lay off the cakes, I think.
there's a fun spot, the cameo to it, isn't there?
There's a very. I mean, I don't know if he did it deliberately, but yeah, there's some interesting casting of his brother, because one of the characters' brothers in the regiment that's about to make the suicidal attack, so that's another added personal investment. It's not. A bit like you, Kaz. Maps going in, your expectations like it's going to be a masterpiece, and I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece. I certainly think it's a brilliant piece of filmmaking, and it is a tense and exciting 2 hours, and it made a nice change from blokes in spandex and exploding robots. So at least.
I have to say though, I watched the trailer. I haven't watched the film, and it's like, and if you don't get this message across, this attack's going to go off, and everyone's going to be killed. And I was sitting there thinking, and that's different from a number of attacks in 1917. How exactly?
They actually do reference that at the end of the film. As one of the characters goes, and tomorrow the filmmakers go and do it. It's you're right. I mean, when you consider the massive amounts of slaughter, I mean, how many people died in one day in the Somme?
The Somme is a particularly bad example because there's a number of overarching issues, but there's just there are exercises in Passchendaele and towards the north of the Western Front in 1917, which is just, it's like, really, you've got a year's worth of data that what you're doing doesn't work, and you know that you've got equipment like tanks and so on and so forth due in literally 90 days, and you're still doing the same thing. That's probably the most unforgivable phase of the stuff. So yes, although it doesn't look like this is done in. Is it set in Belgium?
They don't actually specify where it is.
It looks a bit unmuddy to be in Belgium.
They seem to cover lots of different terrain in a space of 8 miles, from muddy trenches at the beginning to kind of later on. There's some trenches dug into what I guess is chalk or something like that. I mean, they shot it on Salisbury Plain, so I guess here's what they had.
Yeah,
but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I certainly recommend it. And like I say, whereas Dunkirk was somewhat bloodless in its approach to warfare, this doesn't shy away from the horrors of the First World War, and particularly the scenes when they're going across no man's land is pretty graphic and intense. Yes, it's a very entertaining and well-made movie.
And if Kamari gives it a 9, it's a must-see.
Which is she rarely gives things more than about 4.
Well, that doesn't help as well, because I read her review before I saw the film as well. I was like, she's given it a 9. It's easily a 10. You know, I was walking into it going.
So basically, what you're saying is temper your expectations a little bit.
Yeah, don't go into it expecting an engaging, thrilling World War I movie and see what comes out of it. Don't go into it expecting the best movie of the year so far.
Don't go expecting Private Ryan or something like that.
Yeah.
Did you see it in IMAX, Kaz?
I didn't see it in IMAX.
I saw it in IMAX, and it's reframed to 1.9 to 1, whereas presumably you saw it in scope ratio.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I mean, it must have been amazing in IMAX. It hooked me. It was very engaging. I just don't like the Oscars. I know it's going to win Best Picture, Best Director.
Well, it won the PGA award yesterday, so it's pretty much a shoe-in now for Best Picture.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very good. It's not Best Picture. So
yeah. Okay. Well, that's a nice little segue, because Steve can now quickly go through the Oscar stuff.
Steve, good if you remember that's what we're doing. Let me just see the nominations.
Bizarrely, Ford versus Ferrari on Le Mans 66 is in there. Which
it's one of the nominations for Best Film.
That's tremendous. I'm glad it's in there.
Well, it's all right. It's not. I mean, really. I have to be honest. With the principle I take with anything that wins an Oscar is that if I'm prepared to go and see it, it can't possibly be worth it. And I maintain I've had that opinion since Titanic.
There's a lot of stuff in there which shouldn't necessarily be in there.
Funnily enough, I mean, I don't have the list in front of me. Hopefully, Steve's digging that out now, so he's going to go through it.
Up now.
But there is a lot of Netflix stuff that's been nominated, and it's interesting because basically what Spielberg said, was it last year or the year before? It's interesting that there is quite a bit of love for Netflix.
Well, I think it's ridiculous that The Irishman has got so many nominations. Sure, give a nod to Joe Pesci because he definitely deserves it, and I enjoyed watching it. But it's not a 10 out of 10 movie. It's not a we're going to put 10 Oscars in it movie. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Marriage Story, which is also Netflix, I can see why it's getting all the nominations.
That's fantastic. I watched it last week after
the performances, they could easily compete with Joaquin Phoenix. You know, Adam Driver could compete with Joaquin Phoenix. I think that's great. But The Irishman getting all those Oscars, the stuff that Scorsese has done, and The Irishman is getting it. It's like The Departed all over again.
It's. I guess it comes down to the Academy, and we don't know who actually is in the Academy. That's never revealed, is it? It's
mostly actors.
But it definitely needs a modernisation. When you look at the nominations and you look at some of the choices that are made, you think, really? And I agree with Kaz.
That the Joker got as many nominations as it did, though.
Yeah, but you don't like it, whereas everybody else seems to love it. So.
I watched it again, actually, last week on when 4K disc arrived, and I enjoyed it more the second time around. If enjoy is the right word. I certainly mind. I just felt that, to me, my disappointment was it had nothing to do with the Joker that I'm familiar with.
So you had
change a couple of names,
didn't you? So.
Yeah, you could change a couple of names and it could be a completely different film. I mean, really, its connection to the Batman universe was tangential at best. But I did actually enjoy it more the second time round. I'm trying to find the list of.
I thought it's the most gorgeous thing I've seen in the last year.
Photography is great.
Yeah, I thought it's very well done. But again, 11 nominations. Best Picture.
Well, whilst you're looking for it,
Ford and Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite.
That's an interesting selection, isn't it?
It is. I mean, Jojo Rabbit. I've seen the trailer for it, and I thought, what? And then I went and watched it again, the trailer. And I thought, okay, I could be up for sitting through this just to see whether it hits or not. But I understand it's been
divisive. Yeah,
divisive.
I think,
really divisive.
I think looking at that list, Joker's in with a shout because it's got the most nominations. Once Upon a Hollywood's in with a shout because it's about Hollywood, and they love films about Hollywood. But given that 1917's already won Best Picture at the Golden Globes, and it's just won the Producers Guild Award for Best Picture,
it's going to get it. Yeah,
probably going to win. I would suggest that the director nod's also going to go to
Mendes.
Sam Mendes, for that film as well. Although you never know. I mean,
no, they love a gimmick.
Tarantino's day.
they love a gimmick, and he did it in one.
It worked for Birdman, didn't it?
Yeah, and the artist. I mean, they love a gimmick. So he's going to get it. And if the director and the cinematographer, I mean, Deakins deserves it. The director, and cinematographer get it, then it's going to get Best Picture. So that'll get those. But
Joaquin Phoenix will get the Joker.
Yeah, yeah, he probably would on that. And then
Best Supporting Actor, I think Brad Pitt's going to pick that up for once because he's just due an award. He's been around a long time. He's done some good work.
I hope so. But do you think Joe Pesci might get it? He's not been around for a while, and he was. Really
it's true. It's a big comeback, so there's always a possibility he might. But he might find that Pacino and Pesci cancel one another out because they're both in the same film. I mean, Anthony Hopkins is great. I watched The Two Popes as well this week.
He is great in that.
Again, because I saw these awards. Half these films that have been nominated are on Netflix. I might as well watch them. So I started watching stuff. Actress in a leading role, it'll probably go to Judy Zellweger, Judy. But I would love to see Scarlett Johansson win. I think she's absolutely amazing in Marriage Story.
She is,
absolutely amazing. You forget sometimes because you don't see her acting much. Mostly she's just in Marvel movies. That she's a really good actress, and her performance in that film is absolutely stunning. So I would love to see her win.
Okay, I need to watch this week.
Oh, God, watch Marriage Story. It's really good. Good.
Also really tough. I should point that out.
But actually, it's hard. It's funny at times though, and it's also brutally honest.
Funny, but it
about
is brutal,
relationships. Yeah. But I thought it was really good. I was gripped for 2 hours, more than 2 hours. I think Laura Dern will probably pick up Best Supporting Actress for Marriage Story. Although I think Florence Pugh's been getting a lot of
she has,
and she's doing some really good work over the last couple of years. So again, she might find still sneaking in. But Laura Dern's been around for a while now, nominated before.
She's playing the same role again and again, and she's very good at it. But she's playing really nasty, very cutthroat, cold, calculating people so well that you hate them. And I really don't want to celebrate that and have her play them anymore. So I'd really like Florence Pugh to get it instead.
We need to speed this up if we want to give Star Wars a kick in.
Well,
sure. Obviously, I'm just going to say it's a crying shame that Cats hasn't been nominated for anything. But
well, they don't do the Golden Raspberries anymore, do they? It's a shame because it would have swept the board, presumably.
Has anyone been to see it?
No.
I'm quite tempted to go out of curiosity.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. I was wondering if any of you had succumbed to the sort of
but
desire
curiosity
to watch
killed the cats.
No, Kimari said it was one of the weirdest and worst things she'd ever seen. So
that makes it sound quite good.
I did like the way that there was some suspiciously quiet up until that. There were two or three posts in that thread from people who hadn't really posted anything before, going, actually, we went to it and it was great. And it's like, this strikes me as the world's worst piece of second-hand firefighting I've seen in a while. But
you should see it when they've been paid by a certain manufacturer to come and comment on your YouTube videos. That's hilarious.
Well, absolutely. But no, I was just wondering if either of you at cinema goers had gone, do you know what, it's a really cold December evening, I'm off to watch Cats.
I haven't got that desperate yet, but we're into week 47 of January, so
I don't know how much longer it'll be in cinemas, given that it has absolutely tanked.
I think Odeon actually pulled it early.
That doesn't surprise me.
But anyway, we need to move on.
Right, films this week. Yeah, we got The Grudge, another remake. Yeah, I mean, yes, okay, another horror remake of original. Was it Korean?
Yeah, see the Korean film or see the remake that they did about 15 years ago.
Yeah. The Turning, which is a modern take on The Turn of the Screw, with Mackenzie Davis.
Who's very good in the things I've seen her in.
Yeah, and The Personal History of David Copperfield, with Dev Patel. I saw the trailer.
Bit of colourblind casting going on there.
Yeah, it's got a whole all-star cast of people, but it looks quite fun.
His Death of Stalin was quite good.
Usually, yeah, that was really funny.
Yeah. So, and that's now on the streaming service. The only way I've
got a new series actually starting this week.
So it's usually good. Right, disc-wise, Kaz.
We've got nothing on 4K.
I think this is a subject we're going to come. This is a subject though we're going to come back to and cover this year. It was something I wanted to do right at the start of the podcast. We ran out of time.
Well, we got hundreds of stuff coming in the next few months, but nothing to this month.
Yeah, but what's happening disc-wise, news stories that are floating around at the minute, collaborations that are happening between studios and so on. I think it's going to be a strange year for.
Let's cover it next time then.
Yeah, we're going to cover it next time, but I think it's going to be a monumental year for physical media.
Okay, I hope that's a good monumental.
No.
Yeah, exactly, because I'm not really sure you can use monumental without the word bad after it and mean something bad, can you? But let's go with it's not going to be great. On Blu-ray, the Twin Peaks, the entire box set, they're releasing with the new series he did. They're also releasing Hustlers. And although I'm not reviewing the Blu-ray, I'm covering the 4K disc. I think Steve tempted me on this. So
did you enjoy it?
I did. I really enjoyed it.
Did the extra pixels make a difference?
I didn't do a compare, but it looks fantastic.
What were the skin tones like?
It looks really good. It's a cracking little film. It's definitely a counterpoint to Wolf of Wall Street. I find if you watch the two together, you'd probably feel a lot more sympathy for these miscreants.
Okay. And streaming wise, I think we're all going to be watching this on Friday.
Yeah, Picard.
I'll check Picard. Yes, looks very good. Film news.
Oh, sorry, one more streaming thing because I just mentioned Armando Iannucci, but Avenue 5, his new series.
Yeah, with
this week.
Hugh Laurie, is it?
Yeah, where it's set on a spaceship. That's
I saw a trailer for that today.
It looks quite funny in the trailers anyway, so I'll check that out.
Right,
so on Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah, it's during the week.
Yeah, it's Wednesday, I think. On
look up your local listings, people. You'll find it. You'll find it there.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
What's it on?
TV. On Sky Atlantic.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think I can watch that
now.
You should be able to get that through Now TV. Yeah. Right. So talking about Sky, and it was bought out, and the Murdochs are no longer there. A bit of film news this week, because obviously 20th Century Fox was bought out recently, and Fox Searchlight. The Fox name is being dropped, so it's now going to be 20th Century Studios and just Searchlight, because of the connotations around about the Fox name, which I thought was quite interesting. I know we've discussed this on the podcast. Steve has a real hate for.
I don't like Murdoch.
You
think if they're going to do that, go all the way 21st Century Studios seems a lot more sensible now.
Yeah, it does.
Actually, I believe that already exists.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. That's why they can't do it.
Yeah, I mean Searchlight works because I never knew it as Fox Searchlight, but 20th Century Fox is pretty ingrained, isn't it? Really, it's going to take a while to get around that one, but it just shows you that having your name attached to certain individuals with certain political views, when those properties are then purchased.
Well, I think it's also partly because Fox News and Fox. There are other Fox things still that aren't owned by Disney, so it makes sense, I suppose. Yeah, you want to distance yourself as far as possible away from that. Yeah, so I just thought that was a bit of interesting news, seeing as everything's being bought up at the moment and by Disney. Yeah, yeah. The year 2020 will soon be owned by Disney, and we're in trouble when they buy everybody's credit debt, aren't we? I'll make a prediction now that I'll be surprised if by the end of this year someone hasn't bought Paramount. There can't be many studios left, is there? Well, there's Warner and Universal who got together, as you were alluding to, in terms of distribution of discs particularly, but you've got Warner, Universal, who are both big studios and have had hit films this year and doing well. Disney, obviously, everything else. And then in terms of the majors, it's Sony, who obviously had the benefit of being owned by Sony, but and Paramount. And Paramount have not had a big hit in a while. I mean, the only real franchise they've got now is Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible.
So I can see them struggling. They've had a lot of bombs, not enough hits. So
okay. So that's a bit interesting news. Right, so to wrap up the podcast, as promised, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, I didn't hate it. I'm just going to get that out there. I didn't hate it. It wasn't a particularly good film. It was, and I'm going to keep this brief because I know Steve's got lots to say on this, but I really don't have that much to say on it because I've made peace with Star Wars a bit and realised that, it's not really for me. It was entertaining enough. There was some good points in there. There was too much crammed in there. It was apologetic for what had gone before. Basically the first sort of 40 minutes was the second film, just rewriting everything that had gone wrong with The Last Jedi, and there was some good stuff in there. It was just too quick. The editing didn't do it any favours whatsoever. It was bash. It had no time to take things in. There was points where, especially Leia's death, where right, she's dead, move on. And it wasn't handled very well. In the same way that I criticise Rian Johnson for handling Luke's character, JJ he was trying too hard and trying to change too many things. But to be honest, he was left with a shitstorm of stuff to deal with at the end of Last Jedi. I mean, if they'd kept to Last Jedi, there would have been 12 people left in the rebellion, whereas suddenly we had hundreds, and then final battle we had absolutely thousands of ships suddenly turn up.
God knows where they came from.
Yeah, where did they come from?
Well, no, it wasn't the inference that it was the equivalent of taking your space capable Nissan Micra and participating in a quick
the Miracle of Dunkirk and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
they tried to go for that Dunkirk kind of emotional ending, which it didn't achieve because Dunkirk was emotional. It also really heavily borrowed off the end of Endgame.
Yeah.
And
so
again,
I'm going to let you go in a sec, Steve. So I just wanted to quickly wrap up on my bit, which was I didn't hate it. It wasn't a particularly good film. Thank God it's over. That trilogy can now be put to bed. It probably ranks under the prequels for me. Although I did enjoy The Force Awakens. And there was parts of this that I enjoyed, and there were some set pieces that were spectacular, but a lot of the plot devices, a lot of the plot just didn't make sense. If you actually stop for a second, I think this is why it was so fast paced. If you actually stopped for a second just to think about what was going on, none of it made any sense. The introduction of force powers absolutely killed this trilogy. If you set the rules at the beginning, stick to the bloody rules. Don't suddenly just invent things just because it helps you get from point A to point V, because that just completely and utterly destroys everything that's gone before. And for me, they need to fire everybody at Lucasfilm, including Kathleen Kennedy, who were the decision makers. Clear the decks and reset. That's my opinion. I know people won't agree with that.
They are doing
before Steve gets going. The other thing is that when you think back to 1977, and it's quite convoluted that an all-powerful piece of, celestial Armageddon can be defeated by shooting some torpedoes down a narrow exhaust port. It is in some way telling that 30-odd years later, you've defeated an even more dire threat by destroying its ground control radar. It's like,
I know.
Blimey, we really have no
you
progress.
Also just had to shoot the guns, which is a massively bad design fault, isn't it?
It's a problem for sure.
Yeah. If you shoot the guns,
I never understood how come those ships
blows up.
How did those ships get there if they did?
They were built there.
One of them went off and blew up one of the planets later on. How did that get back without the other ships?
They turned on the special radar that allows it to not be a decorative object.
Yes, it's absolutely.
Why can't they put the special radar on all of the ships?
Well, you'd think
they only had one.
Well, they tight for budget because they built thousands of the buggers, so presumably they had a fairly big budget.
But they only had the two. They only had the two wayfinders to find the Sith planet.
Yeah, but why was the Emperor even laying it? Why did he? If he didn't want to be found, why the wayfinders? If he did want to be found, make it more obvious where he was.
Come on, really, Steve? You're talking about a movie where one of the key turning points was C-3PO wouldn't reveal a location because it was in the wrong language.
Yeah.
He couldn't say the word because it was a bad word.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
wiping his memory.
Plot story.
I tell you what, when they wiped his memory, and then 10 minutes later, which was not emotional because 10 minutes later they bring it back again. They should have had. They missed two brilliant jokes they could have put in. First of all, he goes up to R2 and R2 realizes he's had his memory wiped, and then R2 goes, "Well, not again," and then reinserts his memory but gives him his full memory back from before A New Hope. So then people can go, "I was made by Darth Vader." That would have been great. They should have brought Jar Jar back. I mean, if you're going to shit things up, you might as well do it properly.
Yeah.
I mean, they threw in everything imaginable but Jar Jar. I thought that was harsh. Anakin, I want to see Anakin Skywalker again. I mean, I was more annoyed by the things that I thought, if you're going to make a shit show this bad, at least, I mean, chuck in everything.
And the kitchen sink.
Because they had pretty much, I mean, they even managed to get Wedge in for a 5-second cameo.
I saw that. It cheered me briefly. What can I say? I mean, I prefer
the problem with the film was
his own shit, but
the problem with the film was, well, actually, the problem with all these films is, if you're gonna, it's a simple message. If you're gonna have a trilogy of films, for God's sake, plan them out from the beginning.
Yeah. Right.
Don't just make it up as you go along and then completely change it and then change it all again.
This was the disappointing thing, because when you got the three main characters together, they were actually really good together, and they had the briefest of time together. And it was at the end of the films. The last film was when we had everybody together. And it just felt like such a waste, because when they were together, it actually worked out. But none of them had interesting story arcs. And some of them could have disappeared and you would never have noticed, which is criminal when it's a trilogy. And that these are the characters you've set out with at the beginning of your trilogy.
Yeah.
The way you've then treated them or mislaid them, or in the case of The Last Jedi, you send them off on some convoluted story to a casino planet that makes absolutely no bloody sense, but you've got to do that because you've got these characters you need to do something with.
You say that, but I mean, he did the same thing. Abrams did the same thing here with C-3PO.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the same thing. I think the casino is like such wasted material. Like, you can skip that whole thing out, no interest whatsoever. But the C-3PO plot, other than the droid Smith, who was possibly the best character in the entire film,
he got the biggest laughs.
Yeah, other than the droid Smith, I don't understand why they needed that whole subplot. It's just boring.
Yeah.
I have to say that I didn't mind the film. I quite enjoyed it.
But that's a sentiment that I think we've done as well. Yeah. I would also say, just as a random aside, have you noticed since BB-8 is introduced just how much more wheelchair accessible the Star Wars universe has become?
Still terrible health and safety, though, I've got to say.
Granted,
they've got open pit with no railings around it whatsoever.
Yeah,
they've got a ways to go there, but I was impressed at just how many convenient ramps were around for BB-8 to be where he needed to be. It needed to be, so on and so forth. I also hope that Daft Punk got some form of royalty check for that woman on the planet with the droid Smith as well, because she's blatantly just Daft Punk.
You know what? I was trying to put my finger on, and now you've mentioned that is exactly what I was thinking.
I mean, she didn't sing "Get Lucky" at any point. I mean, more's the pity. But
you see, that was another wasted opportunity. Introduce somebody from his past, make him a bit more interesting, but then they just threw it away. You know what I mean? It was like
yes. It was just there for the joke, which was
introduced her. Just basically, she was just there so that you could say he's not gay. Okay, can I make it absolutely clear? He's got a case of the not gays, because everyone will be going about, is Finn and Poe going to get it together? Which is definitely how Oscar Isaac was playing it in The Force Awakens. He was definitely playing it gay in The Force Awakens, but for some reason they just bottled it. We can't offend anyone. Don't offend the Chinese. We better just make it.
Well, they did. They had a lesbian kiss instead at the end.
Yeah. Well done, guys. Brilliant. And the same for Finn. We'll bring in another character for him to see that whole thing about other stormtroopers defecting was an interesting idea that
Wasn't
they could
it?
have done a lot more with. And if they'd said one line, I think Kevin Smith someone suggested to Kevin Smith, who mentioned it in one of his podcasts, but it's a great idea. Just had one of them say to him, "We were defected because of you, your example." It would have given Finn's character so much more meaning.
Yeah.
Basically.
And what about poor Rose, though? I mean, if you're going to feel a bit...
She's got 1 minute and 22 seconds of screen time in a 2-hour and 22-minute movie.
She's well in the friend zone as well, isn't she?
Oh, big time. Well, you don't come with us. Yeah, you just stay here and look after me.
I will say
that tap on the shoulder said it all.
Yeah.
John Boyega on Twitter and other social media, he's been a breath of fresh air. It's like, I've taken on board that you're not happy with these things. Let me go and count my millions of dollars and enjoy myself in all the many and varied ways that it allows. I mean, so full power to him.
Clearly, the most enjoyment I got out of it was just at this and the last movie was Kylo and Rey, and that relationship back and forth. And it's interesting where it is the only thing. And I didn't actually mind the new made-up force powers because I enjoyed what it meant for their relationship because it was quite interesting the way they brought that into the scenes. They could have stripped the rest out of it.
Yeah, but that ending though, life force, and I'm going to give you my... No, you take my life force. No, you take mine.
I agree with the end. Firstly, I don't understand why Rey refused to kill the Emperor because she thought that it would make her bad, and then killed the Emperor after she was almost defeated.
Yeah.
Secondly, I didn't have a single emotion when she died. I actually thought that would have been perfectly fine, and Kylo's got. And when he had to swap places with her, it didn't mean anything to me. And considering what we've come from, and the Lukes and the Obis and Han Solo, I felt a bit sad that these were the two characters that I was happy to follow. But when she died, I was like, okay. Yeah, that's okay.
This was the whole problem with this movie for me, because I should have been a blubbering wreck at the end of this movie. 42 years, whatever it is, I think it's 43 years of Star Wars. And when I was a kid, I was absolutely and totally, obsessed with this franchise and these movies and these characters. And with The Force Awakens, when we got Han and Leia together again, I was blubbing. The tears were running down because these are my heroes, from my childhood, and it worked in that. Whereas this movie, nothing breathed, there was no emotion. I did not well up at any point, and I should have welled up a few times.
Do you know why that is, Phil? It's because none of the emotional beats of the film have actually been earned.
Yeah,
they've done none of the groundwork to deserve them. For example, the ending when Lando turns up with all the ships, that should be emotional. But the thing is, they hadn't earned it. Whereas at the end of Endgame, when Steve Rogers tightens on his broken shield and stands up to face off against Thanos' army on his own, that's a definition of his character. Yeah. And they've built up to that moment. Yeah, and when everyone else turns up behind him to support him, it's incredibly emotional because it's been earned and it's fundamental to the story and the character. Nothing in the film, in the Rise of Skywalker, totally. Is fundamental to the story of the character. The reason Lando is there is not because it's important to the story, it's because we know who he is. Nobody else that he meets has a bloody clue who he is. They've never met him before.
Yeah,
when 3PO says, I'm taking one last look at my friends, none of his friends are in front of him because they're all dead, apart from Chewie, who's not there, and neither is R2. So that doesn't make any sense. You've got to earn your emotional endings. You've got to, and they didn't do anything to earn them.
They didn't.
You can't just start off by ignoring the previous film. Whether you like, and I tell you what, I thought The Rise of Skywalker was so bad. I'm starting to think The Last Jedi is good. They can't just ignore it. If you've read Colin Trevorrow's screenplay, which was leaked last week, he wrote a film that picked up where The Last Jedi left off. Now, admittedly, this was written, the version that was leaked last week was dated 3 days before Carrie Fisher died in real life, unfortunately. So she had a much bigger role in that screenplay. But it was way more interesting and did far more interesting stuff. And to say, they can't just make up force powers when force powers are made up in the first place. You can. Doesn't mean I don't really care about that. I just want a coherent story with a plot that makes sense and characters I care about.
The point I was making there was they were using it just for
they were using it as
for getting from A to B, and there was no respect. Like there was no. payoff
the
to
laziest
anything.
screenplay I think
absolutely.
I've ever. I mean, granted, and I'm going to accept this fact. I don't think that's the film that J.J. Abrams originally made. I think he was forced to reshoot large parts of it by Disney. I think he made a different film entirely. I think originally the whole plot was nothing to do with Wayfinders and Palpatine. I think it was about Sith holocrons and the son of Mortis, and they'd actually cast Matt Smith in that role because that was announced at the time. And then when they got to shooting it, basically Disney said, no, we can't go to stuff in the Clone Wars TV series. No one has seen it. We already discovered that when we did Solo, and no one knew why Darth Maul was still alive at the end of that film. So I think they bottled it and said, you got to put things in people know. So bring back the Emperor, which obviously negates the whole ending of Return of the Jedi.
Wasn't that hilarious that they could have made an entire film about the opening scroll?
Yeah, and they just say he's back with no explanation. They don't explain how he came back, where all those ships came from, who the people were that were populating them, who those guys were in that stadium.
And he was so wasted, you know.
And also it's just slot in, like you said, Phil. Keep it moving fast. Shout your exposition while you're running around. Lots of shooting and explosion, and then we'll ask any questions. There's a rule at Pixar: you can use a coincidence to get someone into trouble, but you can never use a coincidence to get them out of trouble. The number of times they coincidentally happen to be like the idea that you can use a knife to locate some. First of all, the Death Star's the size of a moon, right? She's holding a knife up and going, "Oh, we need to go to that point there." Well, boy, the thing you're pointing at from that distance is still about 3,000 square meters, and you have to be standing on exactly the right point on the entire planet for that to work, assuming the thing hasn't been decayed or broken by the fact it's sitting in the sea. And also, I saw it blow up in Return of the Jedi. It definitely got destroyed. There seem to be large parts of it intact, and even some of the glass didn't break. I mean, it's just the laziest... it's just awful. I was looking at my watch half the time.
That was quite a good set. I would say I quite liked as a piece of visual imagery.
The fact that the doors still work too. How come it still have power?
Yeah, the thing I was going to say is, I think the people who get to this the best are Red Letter Media. If you've never watched any of this stuff, go watch the stuff. It's an acquired taste. Some of you might not like it, but there is an episode that they talk about. It's not this film. I will put a link to it in the podcast forum when I remember what it is. But they talk about these new Star Wars films, and they are on the money about what was going to happen.
Was that the one where they're pretending to? Oh, when their predictions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a bit where they talk about what a Star Wars film has to be. Now, if you look at what George Lucas did with Star Wars, the first 3 films, and then he went back and did the prequels, he didn't overuse the Star Destroyers, he didn't overuse TIE Fighters, he didn't overuse props that you'd seen in the original trilogy. There was the odd callback and that kind of thing, but generally a lot of the designs and stuff were new, and it was new space vehicles and all the rest of it. Then you go to this trilogy, and the thing is, it's all fan service. It's all there has to be this lightsabers
for the sake of fan service.
Yeah, it has to. They have to have these, TIE Fighters. They have to have these Star Destroyers. They have to have these items because they were in the other films, and that's how people will understand what's going on. And it's you can't make original Star Wars stuff anymore because it has to have so much fan service in it to keep people happy. So, if you haven't watched their stuff, go watch it.
Just at the end of it, can I just say, if there isn't a random, never to be released take where right at the end that random old crone just biffing around the desert asks Rey what her name is, she just turns around and goes Mears. I'd be very disappointed actually, because it's just a perfect opportunity. But I mean, again, that just didn't know it. I mean, what was she doing?
That was the same old woman that said to Annie, "Is a storm coming?"
I don't think it was. But yeah, that was that whole scene. Like, why was she in Tatooine? She's never been there. Leia's never been there. Sorry, Leia's never been there. Luke couldn't wait to get away from the damn place. And then she's in the middle of a desert, in the middle of nowhere, and there's some woman going past. And the only reason that woman's there is so she can have the line, "What's your name?" And why is everyone so obsessed with people's surnames suddenly? Yoda ain't got a surname. Never bothered him.
Yeah.
And also, JJ, action does not equal plot. So he needs to learn that, I think.
He needs to learn how to do a third act, because this film was basically a third act that just made no sense whatsoever.
It was second and third act, actually.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, no, it was a mess, and unfortunately for me, because like you, Phil, much as I wanted to be emotionally moved or invested in it, I wasn't remotely. I just bizarrely, my friend who was with me loved it. Said he cried 4 or 5 times. Thought it was fantastic. So I guess it's just, I guess it just depends on what you. I mean, he said, he was expecting it to be a lot worse, and therefore was probably just glad it wasn't as bad as he thought it was going to be. I just thought it was terrible.
He's crying for relief.
I'm just glad it's over.
I am glad it's over. There is a sense of relief that they're not going to be making us wait another 2 years of speculation to see how it ends again. I'm glad that they're done with this.
Yeah, do away with the whole Skywalker, Palpatine, all the rest of it. The Mandalorian seems to be doing well.
Just do the Mandalorian. Great. That's how to do it.
Basically, the Mandalorian is like, a sequel to the original Star Wars, done as if, it had been made not long after the original Star Wars, and they kept it low key. They've kept it, they haven't gone anything since. There's a bit of fan service in there, but it's done in an intelligent and funny and a way that sort of serves the plot. And it doesn't seem constrained by expectations. No. And by consistent fan service at every turn. Basically, if they put a Ahsoka Tano in it, I'll die a happy man.
Well, I'm going to be controversial just to end here, and I think since Disney took over the franchise and so on, the best thing I have seen is Rogue One.
Yes.
Rogue One, yeah.
By a country mile.
Easily. Yeah.
Well, no, hang on a second. Are we doing on the we haven't seen The Mandalorian?
Oh, well, I haven't seen The Mandalorian yet. So
the best TV is easily The Mandalorian, and it's probably a contender for potentially being better than Rogue One because it's going to be more than Rogue One, whereas Rogue One was just one movie. And
the TV stuff's actually been good, though, hasn't it? I enjoyed Rebels a lot. And Clone Wars has some really good stuff in it. I haven't seen Resistance.
So are we ready for Kenobi?
Yes. Hell yes.
Well, yeah. As long as Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are involved, I'm up for it.
Yeah.
Just get Kathleen Kennedy and Ryan Johnson away from it. That's all I got.
They're bringing back Ewan McGregor. They've got no scope to make it silly. They're gonna space western it, and that's perfect. That's what worked for Mandalorian. They're gonna totally space western it. Have him be a samurai, a Ronin, in the desert, keeping to himself and getting into trouble.
And now Jeremy Corbyn's available. They can, really cast it.
And on that bombshell, thanks for putting that line in there, Ed. I knew exactly where you were going with that one. Let's wrap it up. That's it for the podcast this week. My thanks to Ed Selley.
It's a beautiful day. I'm going to put on my best dress and go to a funeral.
Steve Withers.
My ass still hurts from what you did to it the other night.
And Kaz Harlow.
Dude, you got to learn the words.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news and video. Plus, why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. Also, head over and check out our YouTube channel for videos of the latest product launches, CES, and reviews. And while you're there, feel free to subscribe. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.